Hello, everyone. On behalf of AIS, welcome to the first episode of our podcast. My name is Shinmuka Bodapati from the industry team, and I'm joined by Varun Joshi.
Yeah, and today we have Chaitanya, the Director of Technology of SignaPay. He's also the co-founder of DeepRisk, a company that detects fraud in credit card transactions using AI.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Chaitanya. How are you?
Great. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
All right. So to start things off, what exactly is DeepRisk and how did it come about?
So DeepRisk is a risk management platform for banks, and it's really end-to-end, as in there is a lot of kinds of risk in the credit card processing business, all the way from when you underwrite a credit card processing merchant, like you decide to provide, let's say, a coffee shop with credit card processing services. Is there fraud there in the application? Is the owner has committed fraud before? So risk starts all the way from the front end, and then all the way to when the actual transactions start. You can have chargebacks, you can have fraudulent transactions, and mostly we see that in the e-commerce space. As you know, most transactions are going online. So DeepRisk really is an end-to-end platform. So both underwriters and risk analysts can work together in one place. All the checks, all the AI, all the modules all work together to help mitigate risk and help really teams manage risk.
Nice. So overall, it's a fraud detection techniques, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a fraud detection technique, because then it would just be an algorithm. It has a way for, let's go through one application, right? So let's say someone comes to a independent sales organization or an acquiring bank saying, hey, I have opened a shop online and I want credit card processing services, right? Or a sales agent goes to a merchant and says, hey, here's a credit card processing service offer, and we'll charge you 2% or 3%, right? So that is the merchant application stage. So at that point, the application may or may not be approved, and that's the underwriter team's job in a bank or an independent sales organization, right? Whose job is to basically take thousands of these merchants and give them upstream to the acquiring banks. But then let's say the merchant gets approved, right? So that's risk on day zero. So there's a lot of checks that you have to go through. Is the bank account correct? Is the owner's information valid? Is the address either correct, valid, or is it made up? Is the age, are the business partners who they say they are? Is the credit score, all that stuff. But then that's the underwriter's job, right? But once the application goes into the platform, now the merchant starts processing. So now there's a team of risk analysts trying to make sure that a coffee shop suddenly doesn't push in like an order of $1 million in 1 hour. I'm giving an extreme example. So there is risks all the way from when a merchant applies for credit card processing all the way to when they're actually processing, right? So DeepRisk is really a platform in which both underwriters and risk analysts can work, right? Manage that risk. So there is like notes and comments and analytics to figure out, which risk analyst approved that transaction on which day, and then fraud happened. So it's an entire platform, and AI is just at the heart of it, but that's not the entire thing. It's not just an algorithm. The AI kind of is an assistant, right? So AI will act like another risk analyst. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So just tell me something,
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a lot of companies, especially credit card companies, that are also, doing fraud detection for credit card transactions, to name a few, like MasterCard, Visa, American Express.
Sure.
How is DeepRisk different from solutions that they're offering or work that they're doing? What separates you?
Yeah, the simple answer is data, right? So if you are a card brand like MasterCard or Visa, or even if you're, let's say, a bank, right? You have access to only your data, the merchants that you have acquired, or let's say only Visa transactions or MasterCard transactions, right? the place where we sit in the industry, we have a network of partners from our parent company, and then as we get more customers from all over the US, right? That's all card brands, all banks that have basically brought these merchants on. So the diversity of data, right, that our AI model will see, that's fundamentally an advantage. Think of it this way, right? If a self-driving car company only drives to and fro in Palo Alto versus Tesla, who has cars all over the world and has seen billions of miles, so even if Tesla is at a startup level, their data gives them an advantage versus, let's say, Microsoft decides tomorrow, I'm going to build a self-driving car company, and they only drive in Seattle, right? So that's the exact difference.
So essentially, it's a bigger version, right? Like
it's a more diverse version. It's a more so if you look at our data, right, you'll have all card brands, right? You'll have all kinds of merchants from the entire geographical locations of the US, right? But if a single bank decides to do something, well, they have a advantage in that region, so you see only that data. Or if one card brand decides to do it, right, so they only have seen that card's data, right? Whereas we have seen foreign transactions, we have seen weird ways people are trying to pay. They are paying through food stamps. Like, we see all kinds of weird stuff that you won't see if you only focus on one vertical or horizontal of the data set.
So it's essentially good data quality that makes you
diverse.
Diverse data quality that makes you better than other solutions.
You're not better. It's just the algorithm is more like a veteran, right? It's done more tours.
And so I'm assuming like credit card companies, do they just willfully share that data with you, or do you have like a specific way to acquire it?
No. So that's not how it works. So it's not credit card companies who are sharing the data. Basically, what happens is so you have two kinds of companies, right? There's companies like Stripe, right? They will say, okay, here you go. You can do an online business with us, 3% or whatever, 2.9% flat rate, right? For everyone, because they're a software-based approach. But there's this entire other industry where partners go to each merchant and evaluate their risk, right? So they say, oh, okay, you're selling this risky good online. I'll charge you higher, but I'll at least give you a chance to do business. And oh, you're selling pizza just, with a physical credit card. Oh, then your risk is lower. Let me give you even a lower rate. So there is this like nuanced network of partners, right? So, but what they do is, in order to get that business and have a bank basically open a valid merchant account, they have to take on the liability. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? They have to take on the liability because they brought the merchant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in between, they have a risk management team whose entire job is to look at all the transactions and the merchants. So it's no credit card companies giving the data. The merchants, the only way the merchants get to do credit card processing is if the processor has a risk management in the back end, which involves both evaluating the merchant and evaluating the transactions. So in Stripe and Square and all that, right, they have automated teams and whatever doing it, right? But then this other side of the industry, which is individual partners bringing on individually hundreds and hundreds of merchants and combining that into thousands of merchants and then pushing them up to banks. Those don't have the same tools that Stripe or Square has, because they are not software companies. They are sales companies. So they need enterprise software. So they're already doing this today manually, or with non-AI tools, if that makes sense.
I see. Understood. Yeah, that makes more sense. It explains a lot more.
Yeah, we're not actually obtaining data. The whole, like, if you want to open a credit card processing account, whoever with Stripe, Square, or whatever, you agree that they're going to monitor you, right? Otherwise, you'll just take people's money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just the monitoring thing.
Understand. So, tell me, how did you come up with the idea of founding DeepRisk, or even starting it under SignaPay first?
Yeah. I mean, it was the idea was really, usually how it occurs is like solving your own problem. So I worked there for a few years, and I realized that even though we're a sales company, there is a ton of data that goes through us and other sales companies like us. But since we're sales companies, we don't really do anything with it because we're not software companies. So there's all these millions of transactions and all this data, but we don't have the tools to analyze it. And when we looked at the tools in the industry, they did not have any artificial intelligence. It was just rule-based. And as you know, when it's rule-based, it's extremely high number of false positives, like 80%. So analysts every day are going through, thousands of transactions, out of which maybe one is risky, right? Because I mean, think of a rule, right? Okay, I say every transaction above $5,000, I will look at it, right? Well, the fraudulent person will just run a $4,999 transaction. So no rules really work well. So that was the idea, right? Oh, can we bring this industry's tool set all the way to the AI revolution? And can we do it with our data set first, right?
So I understand that. So tell me, how do you deal with, this is one particular situation, as time goes on, the way people do fraud with transactions keeps changing, right? So there's a lot of, I guess, data drift, the type of data that's coming in is changing. Initially, did you guys have a way to handle that, or do you handle that now? And if you can, like, how do you handle that? Because obviously you have to make use of old data also, but you want to incorporate this new type of data that's coming in. How does that work?
Yeah, actually, the question is actually even deeper. How are humans doing it, right? Because if we are doing worse than humans, then it doesn't matter how high tech the solution is. And the way humans are doing it is based on their decades of experience, and which also means bias, right? So if there are entire business categories, they're called like merchant category codes. There are, like, let's say, internet businesses or subscription businesses. They have just been blanketly classified as high risk because they used to be, right? But then Netflix is internet subscription business. Is that high risk? No, right? So, and I mean, human analysts, their advantage is they can instantly, from their experience, sense fraud. But then on the other hand, because of that experience, as the world changes, they still have biases. Everyone, right? We all have biases. Even trained models have biases, right? So I mean, the simple answer is, I mean, I don't want to go into like how we exactly do it, but essentially we basically have old data as well as new data, right? Constantly. But even more important than that, what we have done is we have actually done iterative development, sitting next to the analyst for a year. So every week we talk to them, like, how do you like the platform now? And so we did it for a year, right? So during this time, our development team has basically started thinking like risk analysts. And so the model is way more, or as we are doing improvements, it will be way more efficient, right? Because when you start off, I'll tell you the biggest challenge that anyone will have starting an AI company, and I've seen most people fall into the same mistake. You have a crap ton of data, right? 100 million, 1 billion rows, right? But you have zero domain expertise because you're solving for some other domain. Like, you are not the user, someone else is. And so the initial temptation is, hey, let me throw this data at the most efficient, latest model I know, and that's the solution I'm going to sell, right? But the problem that you miss there is that if you don't know the domain, you don't know all these subtleties, right? Like which parameters actually matter and which don't. And so it's like a throw everything at the wall approach. And so I would say even more important than anything, that learning period with sitting with the analyst, right? That really helped us gain an intuition of what works. You know what I mean? So it's not, so it's now we know way better than a year ago, if that makes sense. Even though the data, we did the data, we do all the optimizations, whatever, but it's the sitting with the risk analysts and starting to think like one is the key to building a better risk solution or any AI solution.
So it's like you need domain knowledge to also solve the problem, not just a technical knowledge of the latest models or anything like that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just save everyone like years of their life and money. Is don't find a cool technology and try to find a problem for it. That's 99% of all startups failures right there. It's called solution in search of a problem, SISP. It's so common that there is a term for it. So either it is a problem that you yourself have, or you understand the domain intimately, or one of the co-founders is a domain expert. If it's not one of the three, technology is not going to save you, right? And you'll see, right? Like you will see this over decades, right? There will be a very cool technology will come up. I mean, I don't want to pick one, but let's just say, for example, I don't know if now it's better, but VR, AR, something, right? And the technology will be amazing, right? State of the art. And then there will be a problem to actually build a startup, viable startup, make money. And that's the same issue. Is it's not your problem. You took a cool technology and tried to point it at something and make something work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, a lot of places, like everywhere I go, I see the word AI everywhere, just thrown around, using AI this, AI that. But in reality, how hard is the market for making a startup that is centered around AI?
I think I question the premise of the question. I don't think that's the right question to ask. Are you asking like what is the right way to build a successful startup in AI? Is that a better?
That would be a better word question.
Yeah. So the right way to build a successful startup in AI is to forget about AI and focus on what is a user problem that you can solve. And I cannot emphasize this enough, because even the startups that succeeded, like I know one startup in Europe that had a $250 million exit. They did the same thing. For the first year, they threw data and AI at the problem, did not work, had to come back, build the platform. And now their AI is so subtle, people don't even know where the AI is. But they basically figured out metrics and the AI is in the back end improving it, right? But at the end of the day, they have to come back and say, okay, who are the users and how are we making their lives better? That's it, right? And then AI, AR, VR, whatever it is something that augments the solution, but is not the solution in itself, if that makes sense, right? So you have to first focus on what is the burning user problem you're solving, right? And then to validate it, you have to build a shitty solution that at least you see people are trying to use, right? Then that will actually give you the feedback that, oh, is this problem even real? And then if it is, then by talking to the users and like improving the solution, you will find out, oh, you know what? I think this part of the solution specifically can be improved with AI. Right? But what people do instead, right? They're like, okay, today I learned about generational adversarial networks. Now, where can I build an app that I can apply this and make $1 million? That's the complete opposite approach. And it basically never works.
So basically, you want to find the problem and then create your first-hand solution or whatever it is. Try to get user feedback, see what's going wrong, what's going good, and then see how AI can enhance or improve.
Yeah, I mean, you can replace AI by any technology, right? It's just software in the end.
Yeah.
right? So don't think of like, oh, how can I build an AI startup? But think of, I mean, I will make it even simpler. Find a problem you have specifically, because in that way you don't have to. Well, so think of it this way, right? Like we're in the B2B business. We are ourselves software people. We're not risk analysts. So we had to spend a year to understand how the risk analysts think, right? But wouldn't it be easier if you're solving your own problem? The likelihood that you're the only person with that problem is zero, right? Because you are a student in a US university. If you have a certain problem, there's a million others like you. So if you have a problem and you try to solve it, then you can iterate yourself for a long enough time to make a polished prototype, right? And then you yourself can see if the AI is honestly improving the solution or you're just bullshitting yourself. Just because you know AI, you're trying to push it into the solution. You see what I'm saying? Because like I used to, I mean, this is years of making mistakes, right? I've gone through 25 co-founders, you know, multiple ideas before that. And one of them was I tried to build an augmented reality social network where you could pin, right? Like here is a dog park, there is this thing, and you can see that in the air while you're walking with your iPhone. But nobody cares. It's not the technology. What is the problem you're solving? You see what I'm saying? And this is very important. Like if there's one takeaway that anybody can take from this is forget about technology, focus on the user. And the simplest one is just solve your own problem, right? Just solve your own problem. I'll give you an example, right? Like let's say your problem is graduating with like a good GPA, right? And you're like, okay, there is this one class where everybody gets a B, but I want an A, right? Okay, what is the problem? Like, oh, well, all these algorithms in this class are extremely, you know, hard to whatever, understand, memorize, whatever. Oh, so let me figure out an app or a thing where I can teach myself with that technique, those algorithms better. Maybe it's visualization, maybe it's a chatbot. I don't know what it is. And if it works and you get an A with it, now other people like you will benefit from that software solution. So you started with a problem that you had. You first solved it for yourself, tested that it worked. Then you scaled it, right? People start the other way around. They start with the solution based on a cool technology and then see, are there any users? Usually there aren't.
Yeah, that makes sense. From a lot of what I've seen from friends or other people, like people go in just thinking, well, I know this, I just want to do this, use AI for it, get as much as I want. Yeah. So that
you can replace AI with X cool technology, right? Like people, when they learn React, it's like, okay, what can I build with React, right? You'll also see this, like if there is like a cool app, let's say TikTok, everyone will start making short form video social apps as if like nobody else has thought of it, right? And if people have TikTok, why will they use your shitty app that you built in 2 days, right? So, but it's the deeper problem is like, and you guys should read this book called Wanting. It's about mimesis, mimetic nature. Humans like to imitate other humans, and the impulse is so powerful that it's basically unavoidable, right? So if you want to do a successful startup, you have to start with a problem. And usually if the startup is good, none of your friends will be actually even aware of the problem you're solving, because it will become cool in 5 years. You know what I'm saying? So if anything your friends are talking about is irrelevant, is what I'm saying. They're at the end of a trend. You want to be at the beginning of a trend, right? So you want to be in Bitcoin in 2013, not when your grandma knows about it. That's like the end.
So then what do you think of ideas that are similar to already those that exist, but add a unique touch to it or innovate it in some way?
Yeah, that's fine. But again, it's not an idea you're trying, right? Again, it's a problem you're solving for a user, preferably yourself, right? So don't think of it as like a sitcom, like I'm coming up with a sitcom. Think of it more like a shark and blood situation, right? If you throw blood, sharks will come. That's how users are. There is no thought. It's like, is this making it easier, cheaper, faster, better? There is no thinking involved. It's like, oh, this is better, right? There is no like, let me build a startup. And Again, this is like every entrepreneur or innovative person has to go through this phase. Like you do all these mistakes, right? Before you hit upon something. And even then, the timing has to be correct. You can't be too early. Like too early is the same as being wrong. Too late is also wrong. So that's why it's very hard to like, this market trends and studies and all this stuff doesn't work. I mean, if you ask people, right, like the best app would be people watching other people play video games that would sell for $1 billion, right? It would sound insane. You know what I mean? Like Twitch sold to Amazon,
Twitch,
right?
Yeah.
But at that time, everyone was trying to make a clone of Facebook or Instagram because they were like, oh, that succeeded. You see what I'm saying? That's the problem. Whatever succeeds, you're at the end of that trend. And then all the friends and every tech person is trying to make a copy of that. But the thing that's actually going to work, nobody knows about because that's 5 years ahead. But you won't find it until you try to solve your own problem. Preferably.
I think that's really good advice. Yeah.
I mean, because this is the number one. It's like if you look at startup failure rate, it's astronomical. 99% of them fail, and it's not even with because of lack of money or anything. Because it's cheaper than ever to start a startup or build a prototype and ship it out. Like you guys probably during the hackathon got OpenAI API access, right? You got if you apply to the right people, you'll get hundreds of thousands of dollars of AWS, Google, all these credits, right? So ask yourself this, the VCs, Google, all these guys have billions of dollars. They have all the engineers. Why are they not just building the future? Why do they need the startup entrepreneurs in the middle?
I'm going to take a stab at it, but I think it's because they need the startup people to think of ideas that no one else can think of. And then they can jump in later and enhance it once they,
but it's actually even deeper than that, is that the centralized innovation doesn't work. Each person is unique, right? And they have encountered unique circumstances and therefore unique problems, right? So a startup person is basically like an agent that is moving around in the world and suddenly hits upon a unique problem. You know what I mean? So you literally cannot build that in an organization. You'll have to build the entire population of the world. So that's the problem. Like each person is, and that's why, people always say like, be yourself, follow your heart. It really boils down to, if you don't, then you build another Me Too product, like a mimic, imitation. But if you build something very authentic, right? Like in 2012, nobody was investing in meditation apps. They were like, what is a meditation app, right? But Calm became now that it's a multi-billion-dollar startup, everybody wants to build a meditation app. But back in 2012, nobody wanted to invest in it because at that time there was zero. Same as in 2007, right? What was the iPhone market in 2007? Zero. But that doesn't mean anything. So whatever is the next iPhone today, for that the market is zero. Therefore, there are no McKinsey studies on it. Your friends don't know about it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So would you say just willingly taking the risk, even if you don't know how well it will do in the future?
No, zero risk. All I'm saying is solve your own problem. Truly solve it, because if you do, at least your life is improved. So where is the risk in that?
True.
You do something better, faster, cheaper. Risk is like you put your entire savings into like another made-up startup idea, right?
So imagine I'm a student, and I'm someone who wants to solve a problem. Specifically, I'm like hell-bent on just using AI. You would say that is not a correct approach. It should be the other way around, which is like,
no, it can be if the problem you're solving is to learn AI.
Understood. So just like but then how would that be?
But again, see, that's the problem. Like you're jumping too far ahead. You're like, okay, I need to build that into a startup, right? Like, for example, if my problem was to learn transformers, let's say, right, which is something that nothing to do with DeepRisk. It's just everyone in the world is now interested in transformers, I'm guessing, right, with OpenAI and all those things. But I'm like, okay, let's say I'm too dumb to understand transformers, right? But then I started with my curiosity going deep into that, or I started going into generative adversarial networks, right? Then I found out, oh, this is a better way to learn this. And I figured out how to learn and implement this instantly in an iPhone app. So people don't have to code that. You can just plug this module. Now you have a startup idea. You can sell that for $50 and you save people's 20 hours, right? But you didn't start with a startup idea. You genuinely just wanted to learn about GANs. And you solved your own problem because you thought, oh, it took me 1 month, but if I just had a module I could just plug in to all my apps, I wouldn't need to learn this crap. And I just built that module, right? The other day on Hacker News, someone created a really nice CSS theme, like buttons and whatever, right? And in 1 day they made 500K because it was such a well-made theme that people could just, they had the same problem. Every time they tried to try a new website, they had to design the whole thing from scratch. So they just did it once really well and put it on sale just for others for $50. They didn't think people would buy it. But in 1 day, enough people bought it, they made $500,000 because everybody had the same problem, right? Like if you're kind of intelligent software type person, you will not be the only one who is having that problem. But don't try to create a fictional problem, is what I'm trying to say. It has to be a genuine thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
So don't think, okay, I'm going to learn this so that I find a problem, so I'll build a startup. Genuinely follow your curiosity or, whatever it is. And actually, you will come up, you will run into inefficiencies, right? Because the world is naturally full of inefficiencies. It's just, you and I are not qualified to solve all of the world's inefficiencies, right? You and I are not going to cure, heart attack disease or heart disease, right? But if we find an inefficient thing that can have a software solution that we naturally run into, we'll be like, oh yeah, I can build something. So I would say it's follow your curiosity and try out side projects, but based on genuine curiosity, not thinking, oh, this will end up in an app. Because then it becomes artificial, right? And then you're not solving a real problem. Other people have gone down the same route. And so you're again imitating. You see what I'm saying? You got to go off the beaten track. And for that, you have to have authentic curiosity.
Makes sense. So just to bring this back a little bit more to an area of AI that I'm very interested in, the ethical implications of AI solutions. How would you say a person should deal with that? Even in their own AI side projects, but more so important for any application or startup that is actually selling their solutions to other customers, because bias in applications, that harm some people is not really a good thing. How would you say we should deal with that problem?
You're talking about, let's say, for example, if some AI algorithm comes up with, let's say, hiring bias or investing bias, right? It has only seen these kinds of people succeed before, and therefore it will recommend the same kind of people. It's, in my opinion, it's a non-deterministic problem. I don't think there's a clear-cut logical or algorithmic solution. 100% area of research or where you yourself can follow your curiosity, and I think that will be that is a genuine question, and I don't think we can solve it. But one thing I will say, one solution I've seen though, that has really worked is, I know one company that only invests based on, they don't even invest. They have an AI algorithm that literally just invests based on the business metrics. So they make an investment decision in 48 hours. This is literally they connect to your bank account or whatever, and they just know all the metrics, and the AI algorithm just spits yes or no, invest or not. And so they have invested in 8 times more female founders than normal investment funds, because it has It's just numbers. It doesn't care about anything else. So there can be approaches. I don't know which specific area you're thinking about, but if you can focus on as much on the mathematical truth of reality, right? I mean, that's one way to do it. But it's I don't think there is like one solution. There is a set of solution. I think this is a great area that, this is a perfect area where you can start working on it. Think about, but even there, like, try to find only one subsection. You can't solve one entire area with one solution.
And when do you say would be the ideal time, say, in the development process to focus on that part? Like once you have a baseline model, or should you worry a lot about it like before you even start a baseline model?
But I mean, which specific? It depends on the domain, right? Which domain are you talking about? So give me give me specific examples. I feel it's too generic, so it's all yeah.
Understood. Well, we can choose maybe, let's say, grocery store analytics. Maybe if you're looking into grocery stores and we're seeing like how, what customers are buying what, like to target, advertisements for certain items for customers. How would, when would the focus on ethics start then? Would it start like before the first model, after you have like one baseline? How would it work?
So your specific example is targeted advertisements to grocery customers?
Yes, grocery customers or any customers, for any store, generic store, anything.
Got it. So you're saying like at what point does ethical consideration start? Essentially?
Yes.
I mean, I'll use the analogy of startup again. So if you want to build an innovative startup, right? When does the consideration of innovation start? And for me, it starts on day zero, right? The people I partner with, they all have to have the same innovative DNA, right? Because as you know, in software, by the time you get to testing, the rocket blows up, right? So you got to start at the requirement stage. So just by pure instinct, and I'm sure there is going to be decades of research on this, but just pure instinct, I would say ethical design should happen on, the very beginning, because the further you wait, the more complex it will be, and it'll be like a band-aid. You're not going to have a core. You understand what I'm saying? So let's say, like, let's bring it back to the investment, right? If your investment algorithm is not, let's say, blind on the type of people who are applying, right? And now you find, oh my God, it's biased against all this, whatever, right? Now you're trying to tune it at the very end, and that's not going to work. You have to start thinking of that fundamentally from day zero, right? This is the problem I'm solving. Like, what parameters am I using? Right? Because otherwise the bias just propagates, and then it's not a fundamental solution anymore. It's like it's a fix upon a fix upon a fix upon a fix. That's my instinct, but I could be wrong.
Understood. No, that makes sense. Thank you for like telling me that, because that's a question that I've been thinking about for the longest time, and I thought it would be a good idea to ask you that.
I would say, like, try to make it as unbiased as possible at the very beginning. Try to eliminate bias at the beginning rather than at the end, right? It's just like the same thing, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? Like, don't build build the foundation strong. Otherwise, you're gonna always try to be like, okay, this is gonna,
No, I understand. Keep putting corrective measures.
Yeah, and it never works, or it's just more and more expense.
Got it. Yeah, I had a lot to learn from this. Thank you for coming out and sharing more about DeepRisk and AI and startup building in general. I will definitely apply some of those concepts, and I'll look into the AI ethics part.
This definitely has been very helpful.
And before we end, is there anything else you want to tell our student audience, people interested in AI, about startups or just AI in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And goes back to your ethics question as well. Like, I think AI is going in the direction of making us all like AI, and I think that's incorrect. I think AI should enable us to become more human. That's what I truly believe. Right? Like, everything that is manual should be automated so that humans can spend more time with their families and in creative endeavors than in coal mines. That's the purpose of AI, not to drill holes in our heads and make us AI. That's wrong.
It's a good message.
It's a good message.
Yeah, AI should make us more human, and it will generate so much wealth that I think work will be a matter of history. Right? We had this like 100 years of factory production, right? But if you think of it today, 1 hour of work in a factory, but compare that to like some guy who worked 1 hour and created the Bitcoin paper, right? The value does not match in creative output. It's not time related, it's mind related. So we'll be working on higher levels of work because AI will automate everything below, but still generate enough wealth that everybody has basic needs and more. That's the future we should go towards, and not basically the dystopian future. And the other thing I would say is, like, just like you said, you have this idea about AI, whatever. I would say launch something immediately, even if it's the smallest thing, right? So I would start off with, I mean, you'll be like, okay, how do I launch something about improving ethics here? Start with a survey, literally a survey, send it out saying, hey, what are your thoughts on it? That's still a minimum viable product, right? And if someone comes up with you see a pattern, you're like, oh, maybe this is the problem I gotta address. Make a website, like start. And then you can start iterating. If you don't launch, there is no iteration. Don't be like, I'm going to spend 7 years PhD and then I'll solve ethics. Instantly launch something and get feedback and start iterating. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much for everything today.
Yeah. That's a lot of
really
food for
great
thought for our viewers and, even for me. I think on that note, I had a great time talking to Chaitanya. I believe Sean
same here.
had one too.
Great.
Thank you. For our listeners, stay on the lookout for more events, more workshops, and episodes of this podcast. If you want to learn more about AI or just talk with other people, join our Discord, which is linked below. And also make sure to check out DeepRisk and SignaPay. Both links are also in the description.
Oh, and I'll give my Gmail later to Varun, so you can, anybody who needs like help or advice or any kind of whatever you want to call it, ideation, I can just help out people on. Just email me.
And just before you leave, we also want you to come back. I had a fun time. Sean had a fun time. We want you to come back at a workshop. There's gonna be like more than 4 times the size of what you saw at Hack AI, because it's in person, and I think your message would definitely resonate with them a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I can help people not start bad startups, that would save everyone a lot of time and energy and money.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.